As you may have already realised, this is going to be not too formal, fairly easy flowing briefing. The most important thing is that the researchers who are here get a chance to ask questions, clarify things about the project that we have out for expressions of interest at the moment, and have everything that you need to consider your submission and to put it through and have a good sense, feel that you have a good understanding of what we're expecting from this project. At NHRA, or the Centre as we call it, we've begun our reconciliation journey with our Reflect Reconciliation Action Plan launched in October last year. Natural Hazard Research Australia staff work from Wurundjeri, Bunurong, Yagara, Turrbal, Burramatagal and Darug countries, and we thank and acknowledge traditional owners of those lands and all the lands where we work, live, walk, and we pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging. We recognise these lands have always been places of teaching and learning and research, and that sovereignty was never ceded. And we invite everyone who's a part of our research program to join us in our reconciliation journey. So what we'll cover today, I'll do some brief introductions, a really brief intro about what Natural Hazards Research Australia is for those who are not familiar with us, and then get into the project that you are all interested in. So give you a bit of background on where this project came from and how it evolved, and then step through our expectations around it, so working through objectives and outcomes. And then I'm going to give you a break from PowerPoint and I'll share the actual EOI document. We'll get a chance to step through it and you can ask questions to clarify anything that you'd like in that EOI document. So components of the project, the process for submissions, assessment, etc. And then depending how many questions we have throughout the session, if we have time left, we might be able to have some open Q&A at the end as well. So introduction. So while I'm introducing the people who are kind of speaking and organising the briefing, please feel free to introduce yourself in chat. You are welcome to put your email address in there if you're happy to speak with others about this project or connect with others to put teams together. So as I said, I'm a node research manager at the Centre. If you are at a research institution in Victoria, Tasmania or Western Australia, I'm your key contact at the Centre. So you are very welcome to reach out to me at any time about engagement with the Centre. And I'm also kind of coordinating this EOI for this project in particular. In that, I'm supported by Vana Dimitriou, and I'll ask Vana to introduce herself.
Yes, hi all. As Blythe mentioned, my name is Varna and I'm in the research services team at NHRA. I'm also in the Victorian node with Blythe. And I'm here to support all things project administration, including the contracting process. So if you have any questions about the EOI, just email through to the research account and I'll be able to help you.
Yes, thank you. So the two people that if you're throughout this EOI process at NHRA that you'll be mostly dealing with is Vana and myself. I won't ask Caitlin to speak yet, as she'll be speaking a little bit later, but we also have Caitlin Sampson here, she's on screen, Deputy Director for Resilience and Risk Reduction at the Australian Institute for Disaster Resilience, and Caitlin will be talking a little bit later about the connection between this project and a handbook that Ada will be developing. About the Centre. So our mission is to work with partners and the community on research that is useful, actionable and supportive of better decision making to save lives and protect communities. We're a national research centre. We began on the 1st of July 2021, building on the Bushfire Cooperative Research Centre and Bushfire Natural Hazards Cooperative Research Centre Foundation, but the centre is actually quite different from a CRC. Our research program is much more an ongoing unfolding research program, so much more adaptive and responsive to the sector. So you'll see projects coming out fairly consistently. We're going to get better in future at how we let researchers know when new projects will be coming out and sort of timelines around EOI, so you have more of a heads up around when you can expect projects and what topics new projects will be on. So we have a real sort of broker facilitator role in putting researchers and stakeholders together with a really strong focus on research that is driven and requested by stakeholders in the emergency management and wider disaster resilience sector. I've put a link there to a video we made not that long ago. It's really useful if you haven't connected with us yet to understand how we work, how our research programs formed, where our research projects come from, and how the centre and the staff work and how you can expect to engage with the centre. It's sort of a little look inside. You get to meet some of the staff and find out how we're working. So that's really good sort of background understanding for anybody who's looking at taking on a project that's part of our program. But we're really here to hear more about this project in particular, natural hazards and resilience in complex urban systems. And I put that image there on purpose because the evolution of this call for EOI documents and the idea behind this project has been a bit winding and convoluted. So I'll give you a little bit of background about where it's come so you sort of know where this, the inception and how this project has come to be. So it initially began when we were doing consultations around national research priorities for Australia, way back at the beginning of the centre, before we were formed and before we had sort of a shape of a research program. Through those discussions, a range of topics for projects of priority came out, and then also some ideas through the inquiries and commissions that were happening at the time. So this is one of those projects. So it was put onto our agenda as a little paragraph that didn't say very much about what the project would actually be, but just a little kind of description about what we'd want to achieve with it. So we didn't have a lot of content for it initially. It was approved by our board, and then we needed to actually kind of fill out and create an actual project brief that researchers could respond to. To help us do that, we set up a project development workshop with groups of stakeholders. Some of those are listed in the EOI document as supporting organisations. It was really interesting project development workshop actually, because as you will all know in this area, kind of wording and framing and definitions are a little bit open and fluid and different. So talking about what counts as urban, what is resilience, is this disaster risk reduction? Are we talking about vulnerability? Is it mitigation? All of that came through. So it didn't begin with a nice, clean, focused sort of project with a clean scope at the beginning. So we had lots of ideas, but it came through really strongly. This is important and we need a project in here to articulate what it was trying to achieve specifically. It was a little bit more work required. So we've had some back and forth in consultation. Through that, we also realised that it was heading more towards work that was very relevant to local government. So we consulted with the City of Melbourne and City of Sydney, so their resilient cities, resilient strategy teams there, and got their input, which has really shaped the brief from a local government perspective. And we consulted with the Australian Institute for Disaster Resilience, because in a very timely, kind of auspicious way, they were consulting about the development of a new urban resilience handbook. So I'll pass over to Caitlin just to tell you a little bit about ADA and that handbook, because this project is intended to be quite connected with ADA and the development of that handbook.
Thanks so much, Blythe. So I'll just take up a few minutes of your time, and I can see some names that I recognise on the screen, but other researchers and other people from other organisations might not be so familiar with our work. So as our name suggests, we're the National Institute for Disaster Risk Reduction and Resilience. And a big part of our role is really to be the knowledge brokerage organisation kind of in this field. So we work with organisations, you know, from across a whole range of different sectors that kind of work in this disaster resilience landscape. You know, organisations from all levels of the national government down to local government, you know, researchers, academics, you know, the civil society, not-for-profit organisations and emergency management agencies and everyone else in between, basically. So we produce a whole range of knowledge products and services and events and, you know, PD opportunities for people working in this space. And a key part of our role is to be the eyes and the ears and to, you know, watch the trends and themes that are kind of really emerging in this space. And one of the key knowledge products that we developed is the Australian Disaster Resilience Handbook Collection. And we keep track of, you know, the key themes that are emerging, and we really deliberate on whether we think national guidance, principles-based guidance is kind of needed, you know, to support these themes. So at the moment, we have around 18 titles in our handbook collection, and titles that might resonate with you include Systemic Disaster Risk, which we published as Australia's and one of the world's first, pieces of national guidance on this theme. And it tackles that really tricky, complex notion of the systemic nature of disaster risk. Land use planning for disaster resilient communities. We, work in the community engagement for disaster resilient space. And there's a whole range of other titles that would be interesting to you. So I'll add a link to our Knowledge Hub where we publish all of those, and they're freely accessible. It's an open source piece of information there. So when we, following the Royal Commission and all the reporting and, information that came out from that, we really recognised that this urban disaster resilient space was really, a critical one for us to address. And we knew that we wanted to develop a handbook on this theme, but it wasn't something that we could just kind of produce in a year, which is a pretty tight time frame for the production of each of our handbooks. So we undertook a really significant piece of scoping, and we had Professor Alan March from the University of Melbourne to support us in that process. So we undertook a really, thorough stakeholder survey. We undertook a range of, focus groups, and really wanted to drill down to what the key issues are for people working and, practitioners and, key thinkers in this space, and what are those emerging issues that are coming out. And so it kind of ranges from all things around, the different kind of systems that exist in that urban resilient space, issues of infrastructure, social infrastructure, health systems, there's so many points that we can hit on when it comes to urban resilience. And so we're currently just pulling together, our scoping report to really make some recommendations around, what we would produce for an urban disaster resilience handbook. And the timing, like Blythe said, for this research piece is really critical, and we can kind of think of the handbook as being a really key kind of research utilisation piece that will time really nicely with kind of the outcomes and the outputs from this research. So the synergies there are really critical, and it's great to be kind of a partner to this piece of research. So we'll be here as part of that landscape as that research progresses. Thanks, Blythe.
Thanks, Caitlin. Each project that we have in the Centres program has a project management committee that is kind of a collective between a research team, the centre, and stakeholders that kind of oversee the governance of the project, and Ada will be on that project management committee, so we'll have a role with the project. As well as that, then each project has a reference group, or groups that we call translation implementation panels, that are wider groups of research of stakeholders to support and inform research. For this project, we have quite a few people already wanting to be involved in that group, but that group can unfold and evolve as needed for the project and for the research team. But we do have quite a few stakeholder contacts for you in place already. I think this is very important to know, particularly for this project, because it had that kind of convoluted evolution and issues around framing and what are we trying to achieve. Please look at this call for expressions of interest as our wish list. The 3 kind of project objectives we put there are quite large in themselves, and I'll step through each of them and give you a bit of a sense of what kind of scope of work we expect towards each of those objectives. But each one could be a nice, big, chunky, juicy project in and of itself. We're not looking for a big mega project. And you know your research and you know what's possible. So to an extent, this is our wish list. You are welcome to put forward to us what you think is realistic and pragmatic as a project in this area, addressing those objectives to the extent that you are able to. But we understand that we may have asked for quite a lot in this call for EOI. So I think that's very important for everybody to be aware that if there is part of it that you think you're stronger on, and you think we've bitten off a bit more than we can chew, please let us know that and submit for what you think is an achievable and realistic project. We're not asking you to solve all the world's problems at all. So I'll just step through those objectives just to give you a little bit more of a sense of, as I said, the scope that we're expecting for each one, because we don't want you to think that we want you to completely address all of these objectives in entirety, because that would be a massive piece of work. So the first one is around increasing understanding, and this came through quite strongly in our consultation, that the EM sector needs a stronger understanding of certain things in this area, particularly the multidimensional impacts of disasters from natural hazards in urban areas. So in saying that, I'm looking to beyond property damage, beyond the immediate physical, fairly obvious impacts, onto flow-on impacts, onto economics, onto environmental impacts, social impacts, social disruption, impacts for communities, mental health and wellbeing, all those other things. We're looking at a real understanding of all of those sort of multidimensional impacts in a systemic kind of way, of compounding, cascading impacts in major urban areas in Australia. So this is another area where we had lots of discussion and debate about what is urban, what kind of urban centres are we looking to focus on in this project. Lots of different ideas around that. We have settled on for this that it's major urban areas, which we've defined as centres with over around 100,000 people, so populations of 100,000 or more. That includes all the major state capitals, but also major urban centres like Wollongong, Ballarat, Toowoomba, places like that. So it's not only the Melbournes and Sydneys and what have you. Part B there could be a big climate modelling project. So we're looking at the ways that the impacts of natural hazards, disasters in urban centres may change over time under the influence of climate change. It's a really strong theme when we were discussing this project, but also rapid urbanisation and other factors. We're not looking for a big modelling project and answering that. So the output that we have connected to this objective is just a kind of state of knowledge review to bring that knowledge to the EM sector. So if you have a team that's quite strong on knowledge translation and you've got some quite like innovative ideas for how to bring knowledge of that and understanding of that into the EM sector, we'd be very happy to hear about those. So we're not looking at going out and kind of modelling change over time in a big way. We're looking at just capturing what we know of that now and bringing it to the EM sector in some way. So the output we have connected to this is really a report that's a review of state of knowledge using probably literature review and key informants, some selected key informant interviews. But please, if you see a better way to do that and achieve that, propose it to us. We're really happy to hear from you what you think is an approach that's really strong and could be really useful in that. Okay, second objective is to develop guidance for local and state governments, emergency services, community organisations to be able to conceptually map vulnerabilities and resilience within urban systems at more local regional scales, so not at regions within cities. And then to demonstrate the application of that guidance with a proof of concept case study. For this objective as well, you could do a really big project just on this. So we are thinking of this one as more of a modest objective in this project. There's quite a lot out there already, approaches to mapping vulnerabilities and resilience that have been used in the Resilient Cities networks at Sydney and Melbourne and other places. Red Cross has an approach. Minderoo has been doing work on that area. So we're really looking at kind of a review and evaluation of what's already there, strengths and weaknesses, and some guidance to assist organisations to use those methods for their communities and then test it somewhere with a case study. It might be a new way to do it. It might be guidance to help select which current approach suits a different situation better. It might be principles for how to do that process well. We're not quite sure what it looks like, so we're hoping you can dig into that for us. There might be new ways coming that we haven't used yet that you might want to test. There's difference in there, but we're not looking at necessarily, so we're looking for it to start with what's already there and build from that, not creating another new thing over top, really, if that's not needed. So the key outputs that we have for the project related to that objective is a report that's reviewing kind of current practice in doing this, what's already there and how it works, and then the actual guidance itself, some kind of guidance or tool for using and undertaking that kind of mapping, and then that proof of concept case study of using and applying the guidance on them. Objective 3, I think, is perhaps the bigger and potentially most important of the 3 objectives in this project. So we've had a question during the EOI from a team about can they address part of the scope in the EOI rather than all of it, and yes you can. So if you want to pick a piece of it and focus on it, if you're going to do that, I'd suggest it was this objective. And if you do that, just keep in mind that of course we will assess submissions that address all 3 objectives more favorably generally. However, there's lots of factors we take into account, so that's not necessarily a given. But this is the one that I think is really important. This came through really strongly from City of Sydney as a key gap. So this objective is around developing process principles and standards that local and governments particularly, but also state governments, emergency services and community organisations can use to effectively prioritise and influence urban resilience investment at local, state and federal levels, and to monitor and evaluate the outcomes of investment decisions. So this has come about because they're seeing that there's a real gap that in Australia kind of investment for urban resilience is managed and coordinated at federal, state levels, and there's not really a good way or good guidance for local governments and community organisations who understand lived experience of their urban communities and disaster impacts to influence and shape that decisions about where investment goes. And this is investment in land use planning and interventions, et cetera, et cetera. So what we're looking at here is developing principles-based processes and standards that can be used to support organisations, particularly local governments and community organisations, to articulate where they see the priorities for investment in urban resilience in their areas, and to influence those investment decisions that are coordinated at more state and federal levels. So we're also looking that they are applicable to a range of organisations that have different levels of capability for doing that. So we're looking at something like a maturity model where it could be as applicable to a small regional council as it could be to a big, highly, I guess, regional city council as a big, highly funded major city council with a resilience team. And we had a lot of discussion as well that is not only relevant to major urban centres and urban centres, that something like this we could, once it's developed, could be applied in other places and other contexts, so smaller communities, for example, but we'll look at that later. At the moment, still focusing on major urban centres. The outputs that we have connected to that objective is a review of processes that are used to prioritise influence urban resilience, and then a draft set of process principles and standards. We don't expect a research team to develop them for the sector. The sector has to take and own them, and that's where our connection with ADA will be really strong, and we can look at how what comes out of this project around that objective can really feed in and support a future handbook for ADA. The intended outcomes for this project are pretty straightforward. So greater understanding within the sector of particularly that multidimensional cascading compounding impacts, vulnerabilities and resilience in major urban areas, supporting those organisations, particularly local government and community organisations, to be able to conceptually map vulnerabilities and resilience within complex urban systems and understand all those multidimensional impacts. So for example, I guess an example anecdote of that is speaking with the people at City of Sydney. Heat came out really strongly once they did their analysis, because they found that heat compounded so many other risks and so many other natural aggravated so many other natural hazards. So they got a little bit of pushback because heat didn't come out to some as a stronger focus, but when they looked at it, and looked at all those kind of flow on impacts, heat came out really strongly. So when you look at it in a multidimensional way and not just looking at, say, immediate property damage, you can understand priorities a little bit different. So we're looking at that kind of mapping. And then more effective decision making for risk reduction and urban resilience through, say, urban planning, building standards, program design, and increased capability within organisations to monitor and evaluate the outcome of those investment decisions. That's something we heard as well. We put money into urban resilience, but we don't know if it really had any impact. How do we start to unpack how we understand the impact of that investment? So I'll switch across to the call for EOI document. If you have a copy with you, you might want to have it open and jump through it as well. Okay, I thought I should start with the duration and budget. So estimated duration for this project we have is about 1 to 2 years. We don't give a concluding date because, as we all know, contracting, etc., is not as streamlined as we would like it to be. The budget, we haven't set a maximum budget for this project, and we're heading more that way in general of not setting maximum budgets, but asking people to propose the budget they think this project needs. And that's why I wanted to make it clear that we're not looking at a big mega kind of climate modelling approach to this project, because if you submitted a project like that to us, it would not be one we could afford to fund. So we're not looking at a huge, big mega project. Value for money is important in the assessment, but it is by no means the only thing we're looking at. We're not just looking for the cheapest project. We're looking for a good, solid, impactful project. And the value for money is a part of what we look at, but is not all of it. So if you have any queries about budget, you're welcome to ask them. But we prefer to get budget estimates from you, knowing what research costs. Tell us what you think this project costs. If it happened, for example, that all the budgets came in much higher than we thought, we would come back and talk to teams and kind of rethink that. But we hope that people will put in sort of fairly realistic budgets. We want to make sure, of course, we don't expect you to work for free. Put in budgets to cover your actual costs and what it needs to be. So
Blythe, we've got a couple of questions in the chat. One's regarding the budget, if we're able to provide a ballpark figure and rough range.
We don't, but we hope that having an estimated duration in there helps. So we're not looking at like a big, long 5-year project. We're not looking, I guess, at funding like 5 research fellows through the project. Yeah, we don't set maximum budgets because then every project comes back at that budget. We actually want to know what you think it would take to do this project well. And also because this one, there's different approaches you could take to it. And we're really keen to see what you think would be and to propose a way of addressing those objectives that you think would be, innovative, impactful. We have our ideas, but you know your research better than us and you know what that research costs as well. So we will look at the budget in relation to the projects that are proposed. If we really love what you have in mind, we'll come and talk and negotiate. So it's not a real set maximum budget. So we prefer not to try to put like hard figures, if that makes sense. There's some negotiation room in there, so we don't do that. There's another about lead end user for this project. We have so many discussions around the terminology of lead end user. It's very CRC language. Our end users aren't just end users anymore because they help us design project briefs, they're involved in the project throughout, so they're more like project partners. And who the end users of the research are not always the people who are our project partners. So we have project partners for this project. For this one, it will be ADA, will be take on that role of what in the CRC would have been called a lead end user. And I don't think John will mind too much if I name drop him, but John Richardson, who formerly worked for Red Cross, is moving across to ADA. He hasn't yet started, but I think he is likely to be the lead person at ADA for this project. So I think, I hope, Caitlin, you don't mind me kind of dumping him in his absence. I think he won't mind. You've mentioned various intended areas for benefit of the project. Are they involved in this? Yes, and they can be who you need to be involved in the project for it to work well. We can help you connect with those people. So I've listed City of Melbourne, for example, but not City of Sydney yet, because we haven't yet confirmed with them that they want to stay in. They've been consulted. Do they want to stay involved with the project? I'm pretty sure they will, but we haven't confirmed that yet, so I haven't put them in. But we can help you connect and get the right team of stakeholders together to support the work that you have in mind. Are you considering selecting multiple independent teams to explore different aspects of these topics? That can happen, yes. Once we get the submissions through the EOI process, if we see that one team looks really good for something and another team for something else, we could talk about putting those teams together or having different work packages streamed. We're very happy to look at different ways like that, which is why we are open to submissions that address parts of the project, because if you're really strong and have a great idea for addressing part of it, we are very happy to talk to teams and kind of put a team together or put work packages together if they can. We prefer them not to be too independent because we want it to be sort of an integrated project, but yes, that is definitely a possibility. Hasn't happened yet in other projects, but I think it will. So it's definitely a possibility. How many projects are intended to be funded? So for this at the moment, one, but this is our first project in this area. It won't be the only one. There could be flow-on projects. We have another project which we funded for our first phase, and we've now extended it into a second phase. This project could articulate areas where further research is needed, and we could extend projects. So we expect to have other projects in this area. We're not asking for those projects yet. So we're looking probably at one, unless we hear from you that there are separate projects in here, that it would be better for these to be, say, two different projects. If that's what we are told and that looks to make sense, we'll listen to that. But at the moment, we're looking for one project. Is having an industry partner a requirement for us? Absolutely. Yes. So and it would be good to look at that, a Look Inside NHRA webinar about how we work. It's a little bit different to what you'll be used to with other kind of funding organisations. We're really sector embedded and driven by stakeholder needs right from the beginning of setting up projects. So there will definitely be an industry partner, usually more than one, because we want all our research to be impactful somewhere. And by having someone involved in some way through the project, that really increases the chance that when the project is finished, that it is taken and used and applied somewhere. So that's a really important part. Who they are is a consultation with the research team. So you can talk to us and tell us who you think your partners need to be, how you work with them. Each project's different. It is very much a collaborative approach. We have a relational kind of approach. We don't set a whole bunch of requirements and milestones, etc., then walk away and just tick boxes when you deliver things to us. We'll be there helping you with engagement throughout the project and support it in the best way that we can. So that's very much something that you can shape with us and that we can help you reach out to the right people.
Sorry, but if I may interrupt 1 second.
Yes.
This is Ehsan. I'm a senior lecturer at Victoria University. Regarding the question I asked, so at this stage at the EOI, we do not need to introduce an industry partner. This can happen afterwards, or you can introduce industry partners to us. It's not necessarily that we have to bring somebody. Is that so?
Correct, yes. If you have a strong relationship with an organisation or industry partner that you would like to keep and apply and use in this project, you're welcome to tell us that as well. So some people, some groups will have like a particular city or urban centre they want to work at because they're really well connected there with, say, local government, etc. So you're welcome to bring that if you have, but no, you don't have to have that established and set up. We have a group of stakeholders already, and we can help you to make those connections as well.
All right. Can I ask another question?
Yes,
Because it's
please do.
easier to ask rather than type it. Look, with the postdocs and research fellows, they normally are on contracts. So if for instance, a postdoc is part of the project team that is an applicant, can the funds then be used towards his or her salary, or we shouldn't do that and then hire somebody?
Absolutely, yes. So you could have, so the chief investigator, we would want to know who they are, but you can have a research fellow earmarked and not know who they are yet and hire a research fellow to the role. Or you can have someone in mind and named, and yes, costs can go towards
investigator as well.
Yes. Yep. We, as I said, we do look at value for money, so we could take in-kind contribution from like tenured staff, etc., into account. Also, something I should mention is we have a PhD scholarship program. They are assessed on their merit individually, but we would be very supportive of having PhD students connected to projects who could apply to us and be looked on favourably for a scholarship. We do still assess them on merit, though, that it's not a given that they get it. We'd look at it at merit, but we'd be very favourable of having, and that would be additional to the project budget because we can provide scholarships. Yeah, so that's something else that we'd like to see.
Thank you.
As far as background and context, I think just that framing and definitions that we all know that it's a bit of a jungle out there with resilience language. Be aware of that, how we've defined major urban centres. So I think that's probably the most important thing to take into account, and that we are really looking at multidimensional impacts. So we're really looking at systems and flow-on impacts and across the whole spectrum, economic, social, environmental, really wanting that to come through really strongly. We've heard about the resilience inbook. Just wanted to make clear, so this list here in the background under stakeholder consultation, there's of issues that were raised in the consultation. We're not expecting this project to address all of these issues. This is background. This is just to let you know what came through during that consultation. So kind of key points, but it's for context. So don't think that the project needs to address all of these points. It's background definitely only. Have a list of inclusions there as well. Because of that, kind of lots of people had lots of different views about this project. I've listed the kinds of, we had so many things. We'd like it to do this, we'd like it to do that, we'd like it to do something else. I've listed the main ones here. You won't be able to do all of these things. We don't expect you to have all of these inclusions. This is not a set of requirements. This is to let you know the kinds of things that when we were engaging, that stakeholders told us they would like to see. Have a look at them. If you can address, some of them, please do. But we don't expect that. That's not a list of requirements either. You're not expected to address all of those. Just take them into account when you're thinking about the project. Exclusions. So we already have some projects that are looking at more of the rural urban interface area, looking at risk and community engagement there. So we're not looking at projects that are, say, doing proof of concept case studies in a rural urban interface area. We're looking more in the suburbs and dense areas, not on fringe areas. And as I said, we're not looking at like detailed future modelling of how hazards will change under climate change moving forward in that first objective. This project has lots of connections with other projects. It's really hard to make projects into discrete packages that don't connect or overlap with other projects. So we have 3 projects in particular that are relevant and have intersects with this one that we can put you in touch with those teams. You might want to draw on them. We just want you to be in conversation with them and take what they are doing into account. There might be opportunities in there, but we just don't want all our projects to be separate from each other. There's one on understanding the resilience of lifelines for regional and remote communities. There's one on awareness, education and warnings for cascading and compounding natural hazards. And there is one on community risk assessment. So we can put you in touch and connect, make sure that you're aware of what those projects are doing and how you might connect with them. And then there are also in the former bushfire natural hazard CRC some completed projects that we would expect this project to draw from, particularly in the kind of the review report. stages. So importantly, urban planning, for natural hazard mitigation. We have an improved decision support for natural hazard risk reduction that is also looking forward to the future. So that's an important one. A recovery capitals and preparing emergency services for operations in a climate challenge world. And we can make sure that that material from those projects are available to you to draw on. All right, just checking. So Matt, is it possible to have partner organisations involved that aren't listed on your website? Yes, it is. Very good question. So we have formal partners in the centre, but we understand that a research project might need other partners who aren't formally signed up with us, and we will be expanding and broadening out who we partner with. At the moment, it's very still emergency services kind of heavy. We will be broadening. That's something we're focusing on in the next year and broadening our partnerships. But yes, absolutely. We have, for example, a community-led recovery project that has lots of local government and recovery-focused organisations on its reference group that are not partners in the centre. We'd need kind of that lead end user role in the project management committee to be someone who's a partner in the centre. But other than that, yes, it can be whoever you need it to be to support your project. So how strong is the need for a link into Unharmed? Is it providing an implementation plan for expanding its use? No, not necessarily. We don't have any agenda there for the use or expansion or application of the Unharmed platform, unless you think that's valuable for what you see as being needed in this project. So no, we have no specific expectations around there, just that work is there, that platform is there. We'd like this project to consider it and draw on it in some way that suits what you would like to do. Does that answer that question sufficiently, Peter? Yep, thanks. Are there any questions about outputs? I guess I would say as far as expected outputs, again, because this is a wish list call for EOIs, this is our thinking and having talked to stakeholders for what we think would be good for outputs. But you might have a better idea. You know your research, you know, you might be able to propose outputs to us that would suit this project better than we can articulate. So don't feel completely locked in to these. You can propose something more innovative to us if you think it would suit the project better. So please consider that. Gabby, so you wanted, so that last question in the chat, that is referring to one of the former projects in the Bushfire Natural Hazard CRC, which was improved decision support for natural hazard risk reduction. In that project, they designed Unharmed, which is a decision support system platform. And so Peter was asking how strong the link needs to be to that decision support platform. So we don't have any specific expectation about that, only that you consider and refer to that project and what it's done and draw on it to the extent that you think would support your project. Does that sort of answer what you needed on that, Gabby?
Thanks, that's great.
Okay, cool.
Thank you.
Okay, we've spoken, I think, to outcomes and about stakeholders, relationships. Okay, we've spoken a little bit about project management committee. I think quality control governance things are fairly straightforward. And as I said, very collaborative. We'll work with you, talk, put something in place that suits the project. But we do have project management committees and we have requirements around the quarterly progress reporting, a final project report, things like that. Regular engagement with the project management committee and a stakeholder group to inform and shape what you're doing, but we'll support you in all of that. I don't think anything there is too unusual. Okay, as far as submitting an expression of interest, okay, there was an error on the project webpage for this project, sorry. We have two different research programs. We have our core program and then we have a contract program where the research is funded fully by agencies. For our core program, which this project is in our core program, we're funding it. You only need to fill out the EOI submission form and then provide any attachments that are asked for in that submission form. On the page, it talked about an 8-page research or project proposal. disregard that. That's what we have for our contract program. You don't need to write a separate project proposal, 8 pages. It's just the EOI submission form. But if you have any, as you're filling that out, if you have any other questions about that form, you're welcome to pass them on to that research at Natural Hazards email. It's actively managed, and Varna will make sure you get responses to help you understand what you need to put in that form, because that's a form. Key dates are listed there. I will give you a heads up. Our executive team is very firm that we stick to dates. There is very little, we don't bend rules. We don't have a, it would be very, very rare that we would accept a submission after a due date. So please take that into account. If you have a contracts office that submits paperwork for you, please double check that they have before the due date. We've had an instance where the research team thought the contract office had submitted to us, but the contract office hadn't by the due date, and then so we couldn't consider their proposal because they hadn't got it to us by the due date. We have no bending on that, so please keep that in mind. We will do everything we can to notify you of outcome as soon as possible. Sometimes it depends on the submissions and what we need to do to assess them and to do really good due diligence in getting the information we need to make a good decision. So sometimes when we get submissions that are all really strong as far as their research capability but propose different approaches, we take off all the research team information and just put the project approach and send that to some of the stakeholders who helped us develop the brief to hear from them which approach they think will be most useful and valuable and impactful in the sector. So sometimes we get external review of those approaches and we take them into account. If we have a couple of submissions that are really close together and we can't really make a good call on which team we think would be best for the project, we might ask for presentations from those teams so we can understand what they have in mind a little bit more. So sometimes when that happens, it takes us a little bit longer to get the outcome to you, but that's because we're wanting to make sure we do due diligence of giving people every opportunity to show us what they have in mind and for us to make a really sound decision. Would you be able to email or upload the T2A9 document? A7 document. Ehsan, can you just clarify that for me?
Sorry. Yes, look, the document you're sharing is extended, like it has more details, but what we received from our research services in the first place, the title is, what is it, T2A9, sorry, A7 EOI. It has only 7 pages or something like that.
We have 2 projects out for EOI at the moment. T2A7 is another project that we have out.
Okay,
so
sorry.
I'll email this to you. Yep. Yeah. After this briefing, we'll email this to you to make sure that you have this one, because your office might have just passed that other one to you and not this one. There's a web, actually, Varna, could you put the project page link in there? Mm-hmm. So the link that Varna's popping in, you can download this document from that webpage. If you have any troubles with it, let us know. And then I've missed.
Yeah, there's one more question.
Yeah. Will you choose one EOI out of the submissions, or would you consider asking 2 or more submitted bids to join together if you wanted specific elements of each? Yes, we would consider that. Absolutely. We haven't done it yet in our new research program, but that's definitely something we do look at. Yep. We also sometimes have researchers contact us who don't have capacity to lead a project, but it's, their baby, it's their area of work, and they would like to support a bid. And if we have people like that contact us, we will let teams know after the EOI closes in case you would like those people to be involved with your project. And then I guess finally, just be aware of this evaluation criteria. So our assessment process is we have a team of 3 who look through all the submissions and assess them against this evaluation criteria. Then we meet and go through them collectively and come with an outcome, which is usually a short list of the strong submissions. And then we decide what needs to be done to make a good decision from that short list of strong submissions, which is often to get it externally reviewed by some stakeholders or to get presentations from a couple of groups to get a bit more of an idea of what they have in mind. But the first step in the assessment process is really focused on this evaluation criteria. So if you have any questions about that criteria, please email us at research@natural-hazards so that we can clarify it for you, because that's quite important to get to that shortlist. What else do I need to say about the assessment? So that assessment panel recommends who they think ought to take this project on, and then it goes for endorsement to a research and implementation committee. The members of that committee are listed on our website, so that's an industry committee, and then is approved by a board. That's usually rubber stamping once the research and implementation committee has decided. So the assessment team doesn't make the ultimate decision, it does the assessment and makes a recommendation. So if you think of questions, as I've said before, research@naturalhazards.com.au. We take all EOI queries through there. Be aware that if you ask us a question and we provide an answer to you, we also publish that answer on the project webpage. So that's the link in orange towards the bottom there. So please check that page. The frequently asked questions will be updated. So if you're asking a question about it, would you like this approach or that approach, be aware that our response to that will be published on the webpage. If you have any questions about how to submit the EOI, please do ask them of us before that due date, so that which is the 13th of Feb, so that we've got time to respond to them and make sure that you can get things in by the due date. Thank you so much for your interest in this project. We appreciate greatly the time and effort that goes into responding to calls for EOI. We're really excited about this project. I definitely am looking forward to it, and really looking forward to the submissions we get and the ideas you have for approaching this project. Really looking forward to seeing what comes back. It's a wonderful part of this role is being able to see everybody's great ideas and incredible backgrounds. So I love it. So thank you very much. Any further questions, feel free to ask them via email, and a recording of this briefing will go up on the project webpage quite soon as well. Great, I'll send you back to your rest of your day. Thanks for your time. Bye.